Fire and Ice was an animated film made in 1983 and was directed by Ralph Bakshi, who also directed Cool World and Fritz the Cat, and who also co-created the characters along with Frank Frazetta. This movie was also one of the few animated movies of the 1980s to receive a PG rating. Now, before I get into what I liked and hated about this film, I would like to give a brief summary on this film. The movie starts off with the evil Ice Lord of Ice Peak, Necron, destroying a small village by conjuring an ice glacier that kills all the people in the village. The only survivor of the attack is a young warrior named Lauren, and he vows to make Necron pay for what he has done to his village. However, Necron's reign of terror doesn't end there, as he also plans on destroying the powerful kingdom Firekeep, which is ruled by King Jarrell, and to do that, he ends up kidnapping the king's daughter Tigra. Now, Law not only has to save Tigra from Necron's clutches, but he also has to end Necron's reign of terror once and for all. Fire and Ice was a unique kind of movie for me because it was unlike any other anime movie I've seen from the 1980s. For one thing, it was much more violent than any other animated movie at the time, as there were many scenes of people getting killed, and many scenes of the lead characters using arrows and axes to kill the enemies, which was shown in a very graphic way. But despite the rather graphic nature of the violence shown in this movie, there were many aspects of this movie that I really enjoyed. For one thing, the animation was fantastic as the characters moved so fluently with the help of the animation technique that was very popular during that time called rotoscopy, where the animators would trace over the footage and use that footage in either a live action or animated film. I've often found myself being immersed with the action sequences within the movie, as they look intense and beautiful. I love the scenes where characters like Lauren and Tigra are being chased by Necron's ape-like warriors, and the characters involved in the chase scenes look like actual live-action characters whenever they are running, and that really brought a sort of realism to the scenes. It is also interesting to note that this movie was influenced by Conan the Barbarian, which had premiered a year before this movie came out. I will also go as far as to say that this movie is practically the adult version of He-Man Masters of the Universe, which premiered the same year as this movie. Now, this fact alone has caused some viewers to accuse this film of taking a similar style from Conan the Barbarian, but to me it only further made this movie more creative and setting up a world that takes place in the fantasy universe. I love the idea that there are two different factions in this movie, which includes the Ice Kingdom called Ice Peak and Fire Kingdom called Firekeep. And the fact that they are at war with each other might sound like your average war movie, but again, with the setting being in a fantasy world where sorcerers exist, you can expect some surprises along the way. There were some things that did bother me about this movie, and the biggest issue I did have with this movie was the lack of character development. Even though this movie was played up as mainly an action and adventure film, I thought that we didn't get to know the characters very well. One of the characters that I wanted to learn more about was the main villain Necron himself, and it felt like the movie didn't really explain enough about him that would make me fear his character. Even though we already know that Necron wanted to take over Firekeep while he's spreading his glacier all around the world, we don't know much about Necron himself, and there's many things that I wanted to know about him, such as how did Necron become such a cold-hearted person in the first place, and how long has he been ruling Ice Peak? I also wanted to know how much of an influence does his mother Juliana have on him. We know that Juliana was the one who orchestrated the kidnapping of Tigra, but that's all we got from her character, nothing else, and I would love to learn more about her background also. As far as this movie goes, there were a lot of characters who didn't really have a clear background story that could make us understand where they were coming from. But the character that probably was the most confusing in this entire movie was the introduction of Darkwolf. Darkwolf was another lone warrior who happens to help Lauren save Tigra. But the problem with his character was that he was just thrown into the movie, like they needed another warrior to assist Lauren because, hey, it probably would have looked ridiculous if only one hero was defeated all of Necron's minions by himself. We definitely have no idea where Darkwolf comes from, and the only thing that we can gather from his character is that he has about the same motives as Lauren about defeating Necron. Darkwolf was probably introduced as a mysterious character that we really don't know much about who just randomly helps out the main protagonist, and why I do occasionally like seeing a character that has a vague past because it sets up the mystery surrounding that character. I can't help but wonder why Darkwolf would want to help Lauren destroy Necron, other than the fact that Necron's a tyrant that needs to be starved. We pretty much already know why Lauren wants to defeat Necron since Necron destroys his village, but Darkwolf's motive for defeating Necron was pretty vague and wasn't explained thoroughly enough, although it might have something to do with Necron also destroying his village. I also felt that Lauren and Tigra's relationship with each other was a bit tacked on in the film, as the film never fully developed their relationship. As much as I love romance in films, I wish that there was more scenes of Tigra and Lauren developing their romantic relationship with each other instead of just falling in love with each other for the sake of the movie. I think one of the reasons why this movie was heavily forgotten was because the characters themselves didn't have enough background stories to make them stand out to the audience. Fire and Ice was rated PG, and even though the reason for the rating is not given, I'm going to safely say it was for some partial nudity, mild violence, and some language. There are many scenes where the characters are dressed half naked, especially with Tigra, and despite the fact that it's because this movie is set around the same timeline as Conan the Barbarian, where characters are dressed in more scantily clad clothing, parents who might want to show this film to their kids might find it difficult to get through the partial nudity scenes. Also, there are many scenes where characters are killed in a graphic manner, and you might want to see if your child or your younger siblings and cousins can handle such violent content in this movie. Overall, I'm giving Fire and Ice an 8 out of 10. Even though I have complained greatly about the movie not having enough character development, I still really enjoy this movie. This movie in itself was very unique for its time, and I will admit that I am a huge fan of violent movies, and this movie definitely was violent. Also, if you're a huge fan of straightforward action movies, then this movie is definitely one you should check out. Well, that's my movie review on Fire and Ice, and be sure to check out more of my videos. This is Rabbitearsblog, and I'll see you later.